Good morning, this is Paul with Denver Decks, and we're going to be taking a few minutes to discuss multi-level decks. So multi-level decks typically exist in two different environments. So one is where on the interior of your home, from the living room to the kitchen to the dining room to the family room, there may be elevation changes on that main floor. And if your dining room has a door that leads outside and then there's two steps down to your living room, and the living room also has a door that leads outside, the thresholds of the door on the outside of the house require that those decks be installed at two different elevations. Now, the other scenario where we see a lot of multi-level decks being requested is when your house is, your rear exit is close to the ground, let's say 2-3 feet above the ground. So, and you're wanting a deck where you carry out, but you don't necessarily want rails on the full length of the deck, so you may have the deck step down a few steps to a location to where you no longer need the rails. And again, I'd mentioned on the railing video that rails are required anywhere in an elevation where you're 28 inches or higher. So the closer you get to the ground, oftentimes homeowners are interested in minimizing the amount of railing. So when you have a house that's fairly close to the ground, it's visually appealing to design it in a way to where you have different elevations and different spaces. So you can dine on one level and then you can lounge on another level, or you could have a walkway that's at a different elevation, and it just adds, again, a lot of visual interest, and it gives you more options with rails or not having rails. So those would be the pros of a multi-level deck. Now, the downside, or the cost consideration, let's say, of a multi-level deck is it's always going to cost more than a single elevation deck. And this has to do with the amount of supports and framing and caissons that are necessary. So let's say we have a deck that's 30 feet across and it goes out 12 feet and it's all one single elevation. Now, across that 30 feet, you may have a support post on each end and two in the middle, possibly one in the middle, depending on the size of beam we use. But if you were to install a multi-level deck across that 30 feet, let's say 20 feet of it's at one elevation, and then it drops down, and then you've got 10 feet at another elevation, you're always going to end up with more support posts and additional framing that's required to accomplish that step down. So multi-level decks aren't for everybody, but if it makes sense to the budget, they certainly add a lot of visual interest. So if you have any questions, please give us a call at 303-730-9642, or feel free to email us at deckman1963@gmail.com. And again, this is Paul with Denver Decks.